here we are in the digital age. Welcome to the promised land. It's everything we always wanted, right? As marketers and brand managers, we've got real-time tracking of customer behavior thanks to our e-commerce. We can communicate with customers anywhere thanks to mobile devices. Measurable ROI thanks to paid search and online advertising. What more could we want? Well, there's one thing. Why is it that now that we've got more data than ever before, more ways to communicate than ever before, customer loyalty in just about any category you look at is lower than ever before, and the cost of getting and keeping our customers keeps going up? What's up with that? And it seems like every year there is some new tool or technology that's going to help us solve that problem, whether it's big data analytics, or content marketing, or customer experience management, or programmatic marketing. But it's just always a little out of our reach. It's like a moving target we can never get our hands on. Well, I'm here to give you some good news. The real key to customer loyalty is not a moving target. It doesn't change. It never changes. It's something that's hardwired into us as humans, and the digital age has simply made it more powerful. And by the time we finish here, you're going to better understand why it has tremendous power to build lasting customer loyalty that reduces our costs and enables us to generate consistent growth. But first, you'll need to understand where it came from. And so to explain that, let me tell you the story of Mary Lou Dinalo. Back in December of 1982, Mary Lou Dinalo worked as a frame attendant at New Jersey Bell at their central switching office in Rochelle Park, New Jersey. The tools of her trade were a soldering iron and a telephone handset. This was back in the day when they needed to connect a new phone line. Someone actually had to solder a copper wire onto a frame and then test it with a handset to make sure that it worked. It wasn't glamorous work and it didn't pay very well, but it offered a pension and benefits, which was important to Mary Lou because she was a single mother struggling to support a teenage son and daughter. And as the holidays approached, she wanted to find a way to make Christmas a little bit more special for her kids. And so she decided to work some overtime hours at the training facility in Hackensack. Now, the training facility in Hackensack was not in a very good area. In fact, just a few weeks ago, one of Mary Lou's colleagues had been mugged walking down the alley on the way to the parking lot behind the building. But Mary Lou put her fears aside and the apprehension about that and said, I want to make Christmas special. And so after a shift, she headed to Hackensack to work some hours at the training facility. The first night was smooth sailing. She enjoyed working with new people, learned new things, helped people out, made it to her car no problem, and on driving home, she even began to make a list of the special gifts that she might be able to afford if she just worked a few more hours. The second night, however, was entirely different. As Mary Lou entered the alley, she noticed there were two men standing at the other end in the shadows. Now, this made her a little bit nervous, but she decided to just keep her head down and avoid eye contact, and hopefully she'd make it to her car the same as she had the night before. When she got about halfway down the alley, she noticed the two men had entered it and were walking very quickly towards her. Now, for reasons she couldn't explain, she felt certain they were going to attack her. Panic swept over her. Her plan to avoid eye contact went right out the window. She became focused on their faces, trying to make out their shape and expression. And when they got within about 10 feet of her, she could feel a scream welling up from inside her. And then her full-throttle brain recognized something familiar, and before she had a moment to think, the words, "Hi, Frank," came out of her mouth, and the two men stopped dead in their tracks, startled by both the tone and content of her words. Now, Frank Passarella had been a pretty nice kid when he was younger. Mary Lou actually knew his mother, Jean. He had gone to school with her son, Stephen. But in high school, he developed a drug habit, and after graduation without a job, he began to steal to support that habit. He'd been arrested several times, and it had gotten so bad, his parents actually had to put a deadbolt lock on their bedroom door to keep him from selling any more of their valuables. Now, Frank was stunned and embarrassed and managed to mutter the words, "Hi, Mrs. Dinalo," before he and his would-be partner in crime shuffled on. And Mary Lou made it to her car and drove home with her heart pounding in her chest all the way, feeling certain if she'd not recognized Frank, it would not have been the happy holiday that she wanted for her kids. Well, what has become of Mary Lou? And what do we know now? Well, in fact, Mary Lou Dinalo is my mother-in-law, and I heard this story for 20 years, every year at Christmas. Since I started using it in my speeches, I'm not hearing it anymore. I think she's afraid of what else I'll put in my speech. But what is it about this story that we can all relate to? What is it about our psychology that allows us to quickly navigate through these threatening situations with very little information very quickly? Well, the answer to that question actually lies deep in our past, because Mary Lou, like primitive humans tens of thousands of years ago, had to make two kinds of decisions very quickly and very accurately. First, what were the intentions of those two men at the other end of the alley toward her? Were they friends or foes, going to help her or hurt her, give her something or take something from her? Or said another way, what degree of warmth could she pick up about their intentions toward her? Then, given what she thought their intentions might be, what ability did they have to carry out those intentions? Were they strong or weak, fast or slow, intelligent or foolish? Or what degree of competence did they have? And it turns out that in the original game of Survivor, tens of thousands of years ago, these were the most important decisions people made every day. It allowed them to know who they could trust, how to form relationships, and to basically stay in their tribe, in their community. Because unlike what we see on TV, if you got kicked out of the tribe, you didn't get to go to Redemption Island. You were pretty much dead within a few weeks because you're so dependent on one another for food, clothing, shelter, and protection. And so through evolution, humans became hardwired to make these judgments instantaneously in all of our interactions with one another. It's become so natural and hardwired, it's like breathing. We don't even have to think about it. And it guides our behavior through everything that we do. And social psychologists have been able to show that over 80% of human behavior is driven by these basic warmth and competence perceptions. Let me explain a little bit more about how this works. First, think of warmth as a whole category of perceptions that have to do with intention. Is someone honest? Are they trustworthy? Are they friendly? Are they open to me? Are they have my best interests in mind, or are they thinking only about themselves? And you can imagine all the other things that you would put in that list that relate to intention. Competence is all the things that you would expect. It's skill, it's knowledge, it's resources, it's expertise, reliability that you would put on that list. And so if you think about someone you know who is very warm, very friendly, very approachable, but also is really skilled and capable at what they do, typically what this causes us to feel is admiration and pride, and we are drawn towards them. It's this basic perceptions lead to a pattern of emotions, and it's those emotions that lead to our behavior. If we flip that around and think of someone who has all the same capability and skill and expertise, but is kind of cold and unfriendly, and we're not really sure what their intentions are towards us, typically this causes us to feel envy and distrust and jealousy. We kind of grudgingly cooperate. It could be a threat to us, so we've got to go along to get along, but if chips are down, I'm not sure I'd feel comfortable turning my back. We flip the other side and think of someone who's very warm and friendly and affable, is really not very reliable or capable at what they do. This typically causes us to feel pity and sympathy, and we kind of ignore and become indifferent to these people. And then, of course, the worst combination is if you're cold and incompetent. That just makes us angry, and we want to avoid you at all costs. And so it's this basic pattern of perceptions, emotions, that leads to our behavior in all of our social interactions. So let me give you an example of this. We can kind of plot this in 4 quadrants, and we'll need a little audience participation. So if I were to pose the name to you, Tiger Woods, how many of you would say that you think Tiger Woods is very warm, friendly, honest, and trustworthy? Just put your hand up. Not all at once, please. Okay, we got where Tiger is. But what if I were to say, how many of you think that Tiger Woods is very competent, capable, skilled, and effective at what he does? Most of you. And so it won't surprise you that in our national studies, that's exactly how we see Tiger Woods. He's competent but not trustworthy. We feel envy and distrust, and we kind of grudgingly tolerate him. Let's give you another name. What about Vice President Joe Biden? How many would you say that Vice President Joe Biden seems very warm, friendly, honest, and trustworthy? Well, some of them more than Tiger Woods. There you go. But what if I were to ask you, how about competent, capable, skilled, and effective? How many would say Joe Biden? Oh, not. Well, maybe it won't surprise you. This is how we kind of see Joe Biden. And that's what happens with vice presidents, right? Maybe they're well-intentioned. They can't really get anything done, so we ignore them. It won't surprise you that someone like Oprah Winfrey is seen as very warm and very competent, has a very loyal following. And someone, say, like Fidel Castro in Cuba, kind of banana republic, not very skilled, very negative attitudes to the U.S., at least as relates to U.S. adults, perceived as cold and incompetent, and we reject him. So this basic pattern, we're using in all of our interactions every day, whether we realize it or not. It's guiding a lot of our behavior. But it turns out it's not just with people, that there are lots of other things that we interact with that we also put through this same filter. So for example, my co-author, Susan Fiss, recently did a study looking at how humans perceive different animals. And it turns out that all the animals we love, the dogs, the cats, the horses, are seen as very warm and very competent. The snakes, the rats, the lizards, cold and incompetent. The lions, the tigers, the bears are seen as very competent but not very warm. But the real place you don't want to be is up here with the cows and pigs and sheep, because that's what we eat. And so this same pattern of perception, warmth and competence, we kind of use that and apply that to animals and pets. And in fact, there are recent studies to show that even computers and websites, we are judging on the basis of warmth and competence. This is a paper called Computers as Social Agents and Websites as Social Agents. They've been able to show that even if we are not interacting with a human, we are judging these based on how we perceive them from a warmth and competence standpoint. And so Dr. Fisk and I had the hypothesis that if it's guiding so much of our behavior in all these other contexts, how could it not be guiding and influencing our behavior with companies and brands and what we become purchase and what we become loyal to? And so over the last 3 years, we spent many, many studies, 10 studies with over 10,000 participants, studying 45 companies and brands and asking their customers how they perceive them from a warmth and competence standpoint. And so here's what we found. In the upper and right-hand quadrant, we found lots of nonprofit organizations, lots of household brands, your Coca-Colas, your Johnson & Johnsons, your Hershey's, your Amazon, your Zappos, all very warm and competent. The lower left-hand corner is where we find banks, oil companies, tobacco companies, insurance companies, all the companies we love and read so much about, the frustration and contempt we have for. In the lower right-hand corner, we found luxury brands like Mercedes and Rolex and Rolls-Royce. And it's important to point out, this is the perceptions of the total US adult population. Owners of a Mercedes may see them as very warm as well, but for most people it is seen as a little bit elite, a little bit attainable, a little bit less approachable, and they perceive it to be very competent but not very warm. And we weren't sure what we would find in the upper left-hand quadrant, but here we found actually government-subsidized brands like Amtrak and the Postal Service and veterans hospitals and things of that nature. So we saw this same pattern of perceptions, emotion, and behavior. And while that pattern seems interesting, that's not really the most important thing. Many of these are not competing with one another. It really showed that we are using that same pattern. But what was much more important is that when we rolled up all of that data and looked at how it was impacting loyalty and purchase intent, we found that 50% of all purchase intent and loyalty could be explained by 4 basic perceptions: warmth, friendly, competent, and capable. Before we mention price, quality, reliability, any of the other features and benefits that we spend so much time trying to communicate, these basic human perceptions are driving over 50% of our behavior. And so it begs the question, if we've got so much more data than ever before, why is it that the loyalty is so low? Well, maybe we've been missing half the picture that is hardwired into us as humans and how we perceive the people, the companies and brands that we do business with. And in fact, loyalty is going down. A study published just last month in the Journal of Brand Management by 3 professors at Northwestern University conducted a study over 10 years, 1 million respondents, 1,500 brands, 75 categories, and been able to show conclusively that brand loyalty and brand preference is steadily going down. Steadily going down. The more data and technology we use. And so our work was also published in the Journal of Consumer Psychology, 7 academic papers from professors at these universities, and is really challenging a lot of what we've been taught and trained. And it seems to me, I don't know about you, that every year there is some new model or theory about how the world works or doesn't work, how we can build customer loyalty, how we can have influence, how we can move the needle, how we can make a difference. And they all are great. I think there's a lot of value to them. But I've often wondered and struggled with, how do I do all of that? How do I tie it together? How do I do so much of that at once? Is there a common thread that allows us to kind of tie these things together and simplify it for us? Well, for me, based on what I've learned over the last few years, warmth and competence has become that common thread for me. It seems to be the underlying psychology that helps explain why all of these new ideas make so much sense and what they all have in common. It's caused me to see everything around me differently and caused me to think that maybe 50% of everything that I was taught and trained during my career is either no longer true or may not have ever been true. And so it's challenged me to step off the corporate CMO ladder and share what I've learned and help us find ways to have loyalty and scale and technology and efficiency and growth. Let me tell you a story to try to illustrate how this works. In August of 2012, Teresa Cook lay dying in a hospital bed in Nashua, New Hampshire. By her side was her 21-year-old grandson, Brandon, trying to do whatever he could to make her last days as comfortable as possible. Now, one of the most devastating things about pancreatic cancer is that it wreaks havoc on your digestive system. It takes away your appetite and reduces your strength right when the time your body needs to fight the tumors. And so Brandon was trying to get his grandmother to eat something, but she was resisting. She said, "This hospital food is awful. I want no part of it." But he persisted, and she said, "Well, there is one thing. If you could get me my favorite food, a bowl of clam chowder and a bread bowl from the Panera bread shop, I would give that a try." He said, "No problem, Grandmother, I'm right on that." He gets on the phone, he calls up the Panera bread shop on Amherst Street in Nashua, says, "I'd love to pick up a takeout order of clam chowder and a bread bowl." And there was a pause in the line. And then the person said, "I'm sorry, there's a problem. During the summer, we only make clam chowder on Fridays. Can you give us a call or come back on Friday?" And Brandon said, "No, you don't understand. My grandmother's very ill. She may not be with us on Friday. You need to make an exception." And so the manager got on the line, Susan Fortier, and she said, "No problem. You come right over. We'll have it ready for you when you get here." And she did have it ready. In addition, she put together a box of cookies for Brandon. She said, "There's no charge. You just let us know how your grandmother's doing. If you need more clam chowder, we'll be here for you." And she did. Because on Friday, Teresa Cook had more clam chowder, and again on the following Tuesday. And it wasn't until Saturday, August 18th, that Teresa Cook quietly passed away with her family by her side. The clam chowder had sustained her for maybe another week. It was just a bowl of clam chowder. It was just another week. But for Brandon and his grandmother, it was literally a matter of life and death, one that they would never forget. And it turns out there are a lot of other people that will never forget either. Because on that first Tuesday, Brandon sent a little thank you note to the people at the Panera bread shop. And he sent that note on his Facebook page. And what do you imagine happened next? Within a few days, over 800,000 people around the world had liked that post. Nearly 35,000 had posted comments. And many of them were from Panera employees saying, "This is why I'm proud to work at Panera. We do things like this in our store whenever we can." Customers saying, "We don't have a Panera bread shop in our town, but when we do, we'll be going there. This is why I'm taking my family to Panera tonight." So what caused this tremendous outpouring of emotion? Was it the quality of the clam chowder, location of the store, the price, the speed of the service, the digital ad campaign, the loyalty program? No, it wasn't of any of those things. It was a genuine act of warmth and compassion for another person. We feel that, we don't even have to think about it, and it moves us. And we are wired by evolution to respond much more strongly to demonstrations of warmth and competence. Warmth is actually the dominant factor in our behavior, whether we realize it or not. We spend so much of our time focused on the competencies, the skills, the expertise, the features and benefits that set our brand apart. It's actually the warmth and intentions that we are hardwired to respond to because it was much more predictive of our survival as humans through evolution. So what we can take away from this story, and frankly all of our research, is that in fact people were the first brands. Faces were the first logos. And all the brand and trade and commerce we've engaged in over the last several thousand years is just an adaptation of the way that we are hardwired to interact with one another. And so we can say, in fact, every human is a brand, and every brand is human. The way our brand processes and form loyalty to them is exactly the same. And if you think about the stories that we heard yesterday, whether it was Dove's Real Beauty or Upper Deck's Heroic Inspirations, think about what they all had in common. They were demonstrations of warmth towards another person, making a difference for someone else. Whether it's toward us directly or towards another person, it causes us to have that emotion, and it causes us to believe that that's how we can expect those companies and brands to respond to us. If you think about it, it makes sense. For most of human history, commerce between people was conducted face-to-face. That's where we picked up all of those warmth and competence perceptions, from facial expressions and body language and actions and all of that. And this worked great for thousands of years. And then something called the Industrial Revolution came along and changed all that. Let's take a look back in time. Let's consider the cobbler, who for thousands of years would make shoes literally by hand, but literally to the shape of every foot, left foot and right foot. Knew his customers by name and face, right down to the tips of their toes. And in the small community he operated in, the relationships he had with customers were critically important. He was as dependent on them as they were on him. No credit cards, no direct deposit, none of all the things that we rely on today, and so they had a kind of a balanced relationship. If a merchant did wrong by a customer, he usually got sorted out pretty quickly, because if he didn't make it right, pretty much everyone in town would know about it by Sunday church, and he'd come under pressure to make it right or risk losing his livelihood and being run out of town. Then comes the Industrial Revolution, mass production, mass communication, mass distribution. There were tremendous benefits, scale, efficiency, availability. And along the way, companies and brands became very large, and this notion of a relationship became kind of impractical. There were distributors and wholesalers and intermediaries. And the relationship that used to exist with the direct customer kind of went away. And the balance that used to exist in that relationship also went away. The people in San Francisco had a bad experience with the ivory soap. The people in Cincinnati certainly weren't hearing about it. It wasn't possible. Now fast forward to where we are now. Not only do we not see the people who make or sell us the shoes, we don't even see the shoes. We just order them. They show up in a box from Zappos. We don't like them. We send them back. Along the way, you could say it's almost been the mass dehumanization of commerce. But now something is changing. For the first time in 150 years, we've reached what I would call the end of the Middle Ages of marketing, and we're stepping into a new relationship renaissance where, again, we are being challenged and moved to buy products and services based on what we know about the people behind them. And again, based on the relationships that we have with them. That's what the story about Brandon and his grandmother was really all about. For the first time in 150 years, the world is now wired in such a way that our brains were wired to work. Now it's just turbocharged with technology. So when someone hears a good story or a bad story, it's not that everybody in town knows about it by the end of the week, it's that everybody in the country knows about it by the end of the day. It's a relationship renaissance. It's taking us back to the future, taking us back to a place that looks more like the way commerce existed before the Industrial Revolution. And again, making choices, building relationships on the basis of warmth and competence. Here's another story to bring to life how this works. It was August of 2006 when I first learned that the tremendous success Starbucks has had is probably not due to the quality of the coffee, location of their stores, or speed of their service. At the time, I was Senior Vice President of Marketing at Aramark Corporation, a big food service company in Philadelphia. And at the time, Aramark was a licensee of Starbucks. We operated 75 Starbucks stores on college campuses around the country. The problem was, at the time, that Aramark was about to lose their license because we were not delivering the kind of customer experience that Starbucks demanded. So in a last-ditch effort to preserve the relationship, Starbucks invited a team of executives from Aramark to fly out to Seattle and spend a few days getting dipped in how they deliver the experience that they did. And I was fortunate to be among the group that went on that trip. And we expected to hear how they chose the location of their stores and how they roasted their coffee beans and how they designed their service and product and all of that. And we certainly heard a lot about it. But that wasn't really what struck us. What struck us as most different and unique was how they recruited, managed, and motivated hourly employees. That was what was different. They told us about something called the Little Green Apron Book, which, as the name suggests, was a little book that fit in the pocket of an apron. And inside that book were 5 ways of being. And these were things that employees were expected to demonstrate every day, not just to customers, but frankly to each other, and even more importantly to each other. And inside that book was a description of each way of being, things like being welcoming and genuine and considerate and knowledgeable. And there were 5 little cards, business-sized cards, that had a little description of each of those ways of being on them. And in the back were just blank lines. And they were expected to catch each other in the act of doing these every day. And they would present these cards to one another. Thanks for picking up that shift for me. Offering an encouraging word to someone that's having a rough day. Remembering a customer by name. And they would present these to one another. And at the end of the day, they would all be put in little pockets in the back room. You see that apron there with little pockets. Each pocket had a name on it. And they would present 6 or 7 of these every day. And what really surprised us, this was not just one of those nice ideas that sat on a shelf or in a drawer. This was a big part of how they operated every day, recognizing, encouraging this warmth and competence to demonstrate to one another within the organization and then to customers as well. And then at the end of the month, they would gather up these cards, they'd send them to the district office, and they would be written up into stories, stories that would be shared across the organization to celebrate, reinforce, and encourage this behavior. And there was one particular story that stuck with us. It was about a store on the West Coast who had a regular customer named Pete. Now, Pete was an elderly gentleman who'd come in a couple of times a week, have his coffee, read the paper in the corner for an hour or so, and they'd head home. Everybody knew Pete. They would welcome him when they saw him come in. And this went on for a few years. And then for about 2 weeks, Pete didn't come in. And they started to ask each other, hey, has anybody seen Pete? I think he has a daughter in LA. I think maybe he's visiting her. Maybe he's on vacation. A few more weeks go by, and still know Pete. But then one afternoon, a young woman came in, and she said, does anyone here know a customer named Pete? And they said, sure, we know Pete. Where's he been? Is he on vacation? She said, actually, Pete is my dad. And I'm sorry to say he had a heart attack a few weeks ago, and he passed away. And so I'm in town going through his apartment to put his affairs in order. And I found something in his apartment that really confused me. In his apartment were 2 big bags. And in those bags were Starbucks cups. It said things like, have a nice day, come back soon, hope you feel better. And apparently these meant so much to my dad that he couldn't bear to throw them away. So I just wanted to come and thank you for the difference you've been making in my dad's life. That's what we should really be thinking about. We shouldn't be focused so much on data and content. We should be thinking about people and stories and making a lasting difference in the life of our customers and our employees. That's where loyalty comes from. We'll get all the other growth, loyalty, consistency, purchase, repeat along with that. The highest point that we can aim for is make a lasting difference in the life of another person. That's where we get the behavior that we're looking for. It costs us less and is more profitable and causes us to grow. That's what warmth and competence can do for your company and your brand. So whether we realize it or not, whether we like it or not, every day we are all being judged on the basis of our warmth and competence. And despite the remarkable gift that we've all been given to accurately perceive the intentions and abilities of others, we are equally cursed with blinders and an inability to see how our own behavior is coming across to others. And this is what's gotten us in trouble as businesses. So much of the policies and practices that we have been taught and trained during our career, maximize shareholder value, measure that ROI, generate a return as quickly as possible, generate traffic, generate transactions, convert those carts, is sending the message that we're only interested in what's in it for us. It's sending the message that we can't be trusted. It's a huge blind spot, and things that we have taken for granted for decades are now no longer acceptable. Whether it's layoffs, price increases, policy changes, all of these kinds of things that we are challenged every day. Why is it that all of a sudden these things are no longer accepted? Because customers are getting the information faster, they're finding out more and more about what our true intentions are, and they're not impressed. They're not impressed. And so if you're serious about building lasting customer loyalty and brand growth, I can boil it down to 3 imperatives for you. First, we're going to have to become a lot more self-aware of how our policies and practices are coming across to our customers from a warmth and competence standpoint. Are we sending the message that we have their best interest in mind and that we can be trusted, that we have the intention to do right by them? Or are we sending the message that we just want to get as much as we can, as quickly as we can? Once we've got that feedback, we're going to have to be willing to do things differently. We're going to have to be willing to put the balance in their favor, to demonstrate loyalty to them first before we can extend anything in return. And at the root of it, frankly, is our priorities. Because if our goal is to maximize shareholder value when we're willing to do so, even if it's at the expense of the best interests of our customers and employees, it's not going to be sustainable. That's what's got us into trouble. We've squeezed out a little bit more in the short term, but we've mortgaged the future by not focusing on building lasting relationships. And so I hope the moral of these stories at this point is clear. In an age when our brand reputation and loyalty can be made or lost in a single day, the click of a mouse, perhaps our ability to demonstrate warmth and competence is one of our greatest assets. It only makes sense in any human endeavor, whether it's personal, professional, or commercial. We have always depended on the cooperation and loyalty of others for our success. And so the notion of keeping our best interests in balance with those of our customer employees, it doesn't require us to recklessly disregard our interests, but rather just keep in balance. It's simply enlightened self-interest. And so I challenge you, don't let your brand become another faceless monolith that has no human face, that has no genuine warmth, that does not demonstrate how it's looking out for the best interests of its customers. There's a remarkable human brand inside every one of you, inside every one of your organizations. If you follow this path, not only can you get the results that you're looking for, but more importantly, you can make a lasting difference in the life of your customers and your colleagues. I hope this is helpful. Thanks very much.